Hi everyone, welcome to Mountain Home Stories. I hope you have read the first episode of 22 Goblins. Think you know how the story ends? The king has carried the goblin back to the tree time and time again, but the goblin, that is Vetal, has more than just riddles. He has a hidden truth. Today we continue the story and see if Vikramaditya, that is King Triple Victory, finally breaks. Don't speak or it's over. Subscribe to Mountain Home Stories if you haven't. And now, let's start. 22 Goblins, translated from the Sanskrit collection by Arthur W Ryder, illustrations by Perham W Null. Fifth Goblin, the brave man, the wise man, and the clever man. To which should the girl be given? Then King Triple Victory went back to the sisu tree and saw the body with the goblin in it hanging there just as before. He took it down without being frightened by all its twistings and writhings and quickly set out again. And as he walked along in silence as before, the goblin said, "O king, you are obstinate and you are pleasing to look at. So, to amuse you, I will tell another story. Listen. There is a city called Ujjain, famous throughout the world. There lived a king named Merid, who had as counselor a Brahman named Hariswami, adorned with all noble virtues. The counselor had a worthy wife, and a son named Devswami was born to her, and was as good as she. And they had one daughter named Moonlight, who was worthy of her name, for she was famous for her matchless beauty and charm. When the girl had grown out of childhood, she was proud of her wonderful beauty, and she told her mother, her father, and her brother, "I will marry a brave man, or a wise man, or a clever man. I should die if I were married to anyone else." Now, while her father was busy looking for such a husband for her, he was sent by King Merid to another king in the southern country to make a treaty for war and peace. When he had finished his business, a Brahmin youth who had heard of his daughter's beauty came and asked him for her. And he said, "My daughter will not marry anyone unless he is a clever man, or a wise man, or a brave man. Which of these are you? Tell me." And the Brahmin said, "I am a clever man." "Show me," said the father. And the clever man made a flying chariot by his skill. Then he took Hariswami in his magic chariot and carried him to the sky. And he took the delighted father to the camp of the king of the southern country where he had been on business. Then Hariswami appointed the marriage for the 7th day. At this time, another Brahmin youth in Ujjain came to the girl's brother and asked him for her. And when he was told that she would marry only a wise man, or a clever man, or a brave man, he said he was a brave man. Then, when he had shown his skill with weapons, the brother promised his sister to the brave man. And without telling his mother, he consulted the stargazers and appointed the marriage for the 7th day. At the same time, a third Brahmin youth came to the girl's mother and asked for the girl. And the mother said, "My son, a wise man, or a clever man, or a brave man shall marry my daughter, but no one else. Which of these are you? Tell me." And he said, "I am a wise man." So she asked him about the past and the future and found that he was a wise man. Then she promised to give him her daughter on the 7th day. The next day, Hariswami came home and told his wife and his son all that he had done. And she and he each told him all that she or he had done. So Hariswami was greatly perplexed because 3 bridegrooms had been invited. Then the 7th day came, and the 3 bridegrooms came to Hariswami's house. Strange to say, at that moment, Moonlight disappeared. Then the wise man said, "A giant named Smoketail has carried her to his den in the Vindhya forest." When Hariswami heard this from the wise man, he was frightened and asked the clever man to find a remedy for the trouble. And the clever man made a chariot as before, full of all kinds of weapons, and brought Hariswami with the wise man and the brave man in a moment to Vindhya forest, and the wise man showed them the giant's den. When the giant saw what had happened, he came out in anger, and the brave man fought with him. Then came a famous duel with strange weapons between a man and a giant for the sake of a woman. Like the ancient fight between Ram and Ravan. Though the giant was a terrible fighter, the brave man presently cut off his head with an arrow shaped like a half-moon. When the giant was killed, they found moonlight in the den, and all went back to Ujjain in the clever man's chariot. Then, when the proper time for the wedding came, there arose a great dispute among the three in Hariswami's house. The wise man said, "If I had not discovered her by my wisdom, how could you have found her hiding place? She should be given to me." The clever man said, "If I had not made a flying chariot, how could you have gone there in a moment and come back like the gods? Or how could you have had a chariot fight with him? She should be given to me." The brave man said, "If I had not killed the giant in the fight, who would have saved her in spite of all your pains? The girl should be given to me." And as they quarrelled, Hariswami stood silent, confused and perplexed. When the goblin had told this story, he said to the king, "O king, do you say to which of them she should be given? If you know and will not tell, then your head will split into 100 pieces." Then the king broke silence and said, "She should be given to the brave man who risked his life and killed the giant and saved the girl. The wise man and the clever man were only helpers whom fate gave him. A stargazer and a chariot maker work for other people, do they not?" When the goblin heard this answer, he suddenly escaped from the king's shoulder and went back. And the king determined to get him and went again to the sisu tree. Sixth Goblin, the girl who transported the heads of her husband and brother. Which combination of head and body is her husband? Then the king went to the sisu tree, put the goblin on his shoulder as before, and started in silence toward the monk. And the goblin said to him, "O king, you are wise and good, so I am pleased with you. To amuse you, therefore, I will tell you another story with a puzzle in it. Listen. Long ago there was a king named Glory Banner in the world. His city was named Beautiful, and in this city was a splendid temple to the goddess Gauri. And to the right of the temple was a lake called Bath of Gauri. And on a certain day in each year, a great crowd of people came there on a pilgrimage from all directions to bathe. One day, a laundryman named White came there from another village to bathe. And the youth saw a maiden who had also come there to bathe. Her name was Lovely, and her father's name was Clean Cloth. She robbed the moon of its beauty and White of his heart. So he inquired about her name and family and went home lovesick. When he got there, he was ill and could not eat without her. And when his mother asked him, he told her what was in his heart, but did not change his habits. But she went and told her husband, whose name was Spotless. So Spotless went and saw how his son was acting and said, "My son, why should you be downcast? Your desire is not hard to obtain. If I ask Clean Cloth, he will surely give you his daughter. We are not inferior to him in birth, wealth, or social position. I know him and he knows me, so there is no difficulty about it." Thus Spotless comforted his son, made him eat and take care of himself, went with him the next day to Clean Cloth's house, and asked that the girl might be given to his son White, and Clean Cloth graciously promised to give her to him. Then when the time came, Clean Cloth gave White his charming daughter, a wife worthy of him. And when he was married, White went happily to his father's house with his sweet bride. Now as he lived there happily, Lovely's brother came to visit. And when they had all asked him about his health, and his sister had greeted him with a kiss, and after he had rested, he said, "My father sent me to invite Lovely and White to a festival in our house." And all the relatives said it was a good plan and entertained him that day with appropriate things to drink and eat. The next morning, White set out for his father-in-law's house together with his brother-in-law and Lovely. And when he came to the city Beautiful, he saw the great temple of Gauri. And he said to Lovely and her brother, "We will see this goddess. I will go first, and you two stay here." So White went to see the goddess. He entered the temple and bowed before the goddess, whose 18 arms had killed the horrible demons, whose lotus feet were set upon a giant that she had crushed. And when he had worshipped her, an idea suddenly came to him. People honor this goddess with all kinds of living sacrifices. Why should I not win her favor by sacrificing myself? And he fetched a sword from a deserted inner room, cut off his own head, and let it fall on the floor. Presently his brother-in-law entered the temple to see why he delayed so long. And when he saw his brother-in-law with his head cut off, he went mad with grief and cut off his own head in the same way with the same sword. Then when he failed to come out, Lovely was alarmed and entered the temple. And when she saw her husband and her brother in that condition, she cried, "Alas, this is the end of me," and fell weeping to the floor. But presently she rose, lamenting for the pair so unexpectedly dead, and thought, "What is my life good for now?" Before killing herself, she prayed to the goddess, "O goddess, one only deity of happiness and character, partaker of the life of Shiva, refuge of all women folk, destroyer of grief, why have you killed my husband and my brother at one fell swoop? It was not right, for I was always devoted to you. Then be my refuge when I pray to you, and hear my one pitiful prayer. I shall leave this wretched body of mine on this spot, but in every future life of mine, O goddess, may I have the same husband and brother." Thus she prayed, praised, and worshipped the goddess, then tied a rope to an Ashoka tree which grew there. But while she was arranging the rope around her neck, a voice from heaven cried, "Do nothing rash, my daughter. Leave the rope alone. Though you are young, I am pleased with your unusual goodness. Place the 2 heads on the 2 bodies, and they shall rise up again and live through my favor." So Lovely left the rope alone and joyfully went to the bodies. But in her great hurry and confusion, she made a mistake. She put her husband's head on her brother's body, and her brother's head on her husband's body. Then they arose, sound and well, like men awaking from a dream. And they were all delighted to hear one another's adventures, worshipped the goddess, and went on their way. Now as she walked along, Lovely noticed that she had made a mistake in their heads, and she was troubled and did not know what to do. When the goblin had told this story, she asked the king, "O king, when they were mingled in this way, which should be her husband? If you know, and do not tell, then the curse I spoke of will be fulfilled." And the king said to the goblin, "The body with the husband's head on it is her husband, for the head is the most important member. It is by the head that we recognize people." Then the goblin slipped from the king's shoulder as before and quickly disappeared, and the king went back, determined to catch him. 7th Goblin. The mutual services of King Fierce Lion and Prince Good. Which is the more deserving? Then the king went back to the sisu tree, put the goblin on his shoulder as before, and started. And as he walked along, the goblin said, "O king, I will tell you a story to amuse your weariness. Listen. On the shore of the Eastern Ocean is Copper City. There a king named Fierce Lion lived. He turned his back to other men's wives, but not to fighting men. He destroyed his enemies, but not other men's wealth. One day, a popular prince named Good came from the south to the king's gate. He introduced himself, but did not get what he wanted from the king. And he thought, "If I am born a prince, why am I so poor? And if I am to be poor, why did God give me so many desires? For this king pays no attention to me, though I wait upon him and grow weary and faint with hunger." While he was thinking, the king went hunting. He went with many horsemen and footmen, and the prince ran along in the dress of a pilgrim with a club in his hand. And during the hunt, the king chased a great boar a long distance, and so came into another forest. There he lost sight of the boar, for the trail was covered with leaves and grass. And the king was tired and lost his way in the forest. Only the pilgrim prince thought nothing of his life, and hungry and thirsty as he was, he followed on foot the king who rode a swift horse. And when the king saw him following, he spoke lovingly. "My good man, do you perhaps know the way we came?" And the pilgrim bowed low and said, "I know, your majesty, but first rest yourself a moment. The blazing sun, the middle jewel in the girdle of heaven's bride, is terribly hot." Then the king said eagerly, "See if there is water anywhere." And the pilgrim agreed and climbed a high tree and looked around. And he saw a river and climbed down and took the king to it. He unsaddled the horse, gave him water and grass, and let him rest. And when the king had bathed, the pilgrim took 2 fine mangoes from his shirt, washed them, and gave them to the king. "Where did you get these?" asked the king. And the pilgrim bowed and said, "Your majesty, I have lived on such food for 10 years. While I was serving your majesty, I had to live like a monk." And the king said, "What can I say? You deserve your name of good." And he was filled with pity and shame, and thought, "A curse on kings who do not know whether their servants are happy or not, and a curse on their attendants who do not tell them this and that." And when the pilgrim insisted, the king was prevailed on to take the 2 mangoes. He rested there with the pilgrim and ate the mangoes and drank water with the pilgrim, who was accustomed to eat mangoes and drink water. Then the pilgrim saddled the horse and went ahead to show the way, and at last, at the king's command, mounted behind on the horse. So the king found his soldiers and went safely home. And when he got there, he proclaimed the devotion of the pilgrim and made him a rich man, but could not feel that he had paid his debt. So Good stayed there happily with King Fierce Lion and stopped living as a pilgrim. One day, the king sent Good to Ceylon to ask for the hand of the daughter of the king of Ceylon. So he set out after sacrificing to the proper god and entered a ship with some Brahmins chosen by the king. And when the ship had safely reached the middle of the ocean, there suddenly arose from the waves a very large flagpole made of gold, with a top that touched the sky. It was adorned with waving banners of various colors and was quite astonishing. At the same moment, the clouds gathered. It began to rain violently, and a mighty wind blew, and the ship was driven by the storm winds and caught on the flagpole. Then the pole began to sink, dragging the ship with it into the raging waves. And the Brahmins who were there were overcome with fear and cursed the name of their king, Fierce Lion. But Good could not endure that because of his devotion to his king. He took his sword in his hand, girt up his garment, and threw himself after the flagpole into the sea. He had no fear of the pole, which seemed a refuge from the ocean. Then as he sank, the ship was battered by the winds and waves and broke up, and all in it fell into the mouths of sharks. But Good sank into the ocean, and when he looked about, he saw a wonderful city. There he entered a shrine to Gauri, tall as the heavenly mountain, with great gem-sprinkled banners on walls made of different kinds of jewels, in a golden temple blazing with jeweled pillars, with a garden that had a pool, the stairs to which were made of splendid gems. After he had bowed low and praised and worshipped the goddess there, he sat down before her in amazement, wondering if it was all a conjurer's trick. Just then the door was suddenly opened by a heavenly maiden. Her eyes were like lotuses, her face like the moon. She had a smile like a flower, and a body soft as lotus stems, and 1,000 women waited upon her. She entered the shrine of the goddess and the heart of good at the same moment. And when she had worshipped the goddess there, she went out from the shrine, but not from the heart of good. She entered a circle of light, and good followed her. And he saw another splendid house that seemed like a place of meeting for all riches and all enjoyments. And he saw the girl sitting on a jeweled couch, and he approached and sat beside her. He was like a man painted in a picture, for his eyes were fastened on her face. Now a servant of the maiden saw that his body was thrilled, that he was intent upon the maiden, that he was in love. She understood his feelings and said to him, "Sir, you are our guest. Enjoy the hospitality of my mistress. Arise, bathe, eat." And he felt a little hope at her words, and went to a pool in the garden which she showed him. He plunged into the pool, and when he rose to the surface, he found himself in the pool of King Fierce Lion in Copper City. And when he saw that he had come there so suddenly, he thought, "Oh, what does it mean? Where is that heavenly garden? What a difference between the sight of that girl, which was like nectar to me, and this immediate separation from her, which is like terrible poison. It was no dream. I was awake when the serving maid deceived me and made a fool of me." He was like a madman without the girl. He wandered in the garden and mourned in a lovelorn way. He was surrounded by wind-blown flower pollen, which seemed to him the yellow flames of separation. And when the gardener saw him in this state, he went and told the king. And the king was troubled. He went himself to see Good and asked him soothingly, "What does this mean? Tell me, my friend, where did you go? And where did you come? And where did you stay? And what did you fall into?" Then Good told him the whole adventure. And the king thought, "Ah, it is fortunate for me that this brave man is lovelorn, for now I have a chance to pay my debt to him." So the king said to him, "My friend, give over this vain grief. I will go with you by the same road and bring you to the heavenly maiden." So he comforted Good and made him take a bath. The next day he transferred his royal duties to his counselors and entered a ship with Good. Good showed the way through the sea, and they saw the flagpole with its banners rising as before in the middle of the ocean. Then Good said to the king, "Your Majesty, here is the magic flagpole standing up. When I sink down there, you must sink too along the flagpole." So when they came near the sinking pole, Good jumped first, and the king followed him. They sank down and came to the heavenly city, and the king was astonished. And after he had worshipped the goddess, he sat down with Good. Then the girl, like beauty personified, came out of the circle of light with her friends. "There she is, the lovely creature," said Good, and the king thought, "He is quite right to love her." But when she saw the king looking like a god, she wondered who the strange and wonderful man might be, and entered the shrine to worship the goddess. But the king took Good and went into the garden to show how little he cared about her. A moment later, the girl came from the shrine. She had been praying for a good husband, and she said to her girlfriend, "My friend, I wonder where I could see the man who was here. Where is the great man? You girls must hunt for him and ask him to be good enough to come and accept our hospitality, for he is a wonderful man, and we must be polite to him." So the girl found him in the garden and gave him her mistress's message very respectfully. But the brave king spoke loftily to her. Your words are hospitable enough. Nothing else is necessary. Now when her mistress had heard what he said, she thought he was a noble character, better than anybody else. She was attracted by the courage of the king in refusing a sort of hospitality which was almost too much to offer a mere man, and thought about the fulfillment of her prayer for a husband. So she went into the garden herself. She drew near to the king and lovingly begged him to accept her hospitality. But the king pointed to Good and said, My dear girl, he told me of the goddess here, and I came to see her. And by following the flagpole, I saw the goddess and her very marvelous temple. It was only afterwards that I happened to see you. Then the girl said, O king, you may be interested in seeing a city which is the wonder of the three worlds. And the king laughed and said, He told me about that too. I believe there is a pool for bathing there. And the girl said, O king, do not say that. I am not a deceitful girl. Why should I deceive an honorable man, especially as your noble character has made me feel like a servant? Pray do not refuse me. So the king agreed and went with Good and the girl to the edge of the circle of light. There a door opened, and he entered and saw another heavenly city like a second hill of heaven, for it was built of gems and gold, and the flowers and fruits of every season grew there at the same time. And the princess seated the king on a splendid throne and brought him gifts and said, Your Majesty, I am the daughter of the great god Blackwheel, but Vishnu sent my father to heaven, and I inherited these two magic cities where one has everything he wants. There is no old age or death to trouble us here, and now you are in the place of my father to rule over the cities and over me. So she offered him herself and all she had. But the king said, In that case, you are my daughter, and I give you in marriage to my brave friend Good. In the king's words, she saw the fulfillment of her prayer, and being sensible and modest, she agreed. So the king married them and gave all the magic wealth to happy Good and said, My friend, I have paid you now for one of the 2 mangoes which I ate, but I remain in your debt for the second. Then he asked the princess how he could get back to his city, and she gave the king a sword called Invincible, and the magic fruit which wards off birth, old age, and death. And the king took the sword and the fruit, plunged into the pool which she showed him, and came up in his own country, feeling completely successful. But Good ruled happily over the kingdom of the princess. When the goblin had told this story, he asked the king, O king, which of these two deserves more credit for plunging into the sea? And the king was afraid of the curse, so he gave a true answer. Good seems to me the more deserving, for he did not know the truth beforehand, but plunged without hope into the sea, while the king knew the truth when he jumped. And as soon as the king broke silence, the goblin slipped from his shoulder as before without being seen and went to the sisu tree. And the king tried as before to catch him. Brave men do not waver until they have finished what they have begun. 8th Goblin, the specialist in food, the specialist in women, and the specialist in cotton. Which is the cleverest? So the king went back under the sisu tree, caught the goblin just as before, put him on his shoulder, and started toward the monk. And as he walked along, the goblin on his shoulder spoke and said, O king, listen once more to the following story to beguile your weariness. In the Anga country, there is a great region called forest. There lived a great Brahman, pious and wealthy, whose name was Vishnu Swami. To his worthy wife, 3 sons were born, one after another. When they had grown to be young men, specialists in matter of luxury, They were sent one day by their father to find a turtle for a sacrifice which he had begun. So the brothers went to the ocean, and there they found a turtle. Then the eldest said to the two younger, "One of you take this turtle for father's sacrifice. I cannot carry a slimy thing that smells raw." But when the eldest said this, the two younger said, "Sir, if you feel disgust, why shouldn't we?" When the eldest heard this, he said, "You take the turtle, otherwise father's sacrifice will be ruined on your account. Then you and father too will surely go to hell." When they heard him, the two younger brothers laughed and said, "Sir, you seem to know our common duty, but not your own." Then the eldest said, "What? Are you not aware that I am a connoisseur in food? For I am a specialist in foods. How can I touch this loathsome thing?" When he heard these words, the second brother said, "But I am even more of a connoisseur. I am a specialist in women. So how can I touch it?" After this speech, the eldest said to the youngest, "Do you then, being younger than us, carry the turtle?" Then the youngest frowned and said to them, "Fools! I am a great specialist in cotton." So the three brothers quarreled, and arrogantly leaving the turtle behind them, they went to have the matter decided at Pinnacle, the capital of a king called Conqueror. When they came there and had been announced and introduced by the doorkeeper, they told their story to the king. And when the king had heard all, he said, "Stay here, I will examine you one after another." So they agreed, and all stayed there. Then the king invited them in at his own dinner hour, seated them on magnificent seats, and set before them sweet dishes of 6 flavors, fit for a king. While all the rest ate, one of the Brahmins, the specialist in food, disgustedly shook his head and refused to eat. And when the king himself asked him why he would not eat food that was sweet and savory, he respectfully replied, "Your Majesty, in this food there is the odor of smoke from a burning corpse. Therefore, I do not wish to eat it, however sweet it may be." Then, at the king's command, all the rest smelled of it and declared it the best of winter rice and perfectly sweet. But the food critic held his nose and would not touch it. Now when the king reflected and made a careful investigation, he learned from the commissioners that the dish was made of rice grown near a village crematory. Then he was greatly astonished and pleased and said, "Brahman, you are certainly a judge of food. Pray take something else." After dinner, the king dismissed them to their rooms and sent for the most beautiful woman of his court. And at night he sent this lovely creature, all adorned, to the second brother, the specialist in women. She came with a servant of the king to his chamber, and when she entered, she seemed to illuminate the room. But the judge of women almost fainted, and stopping his nose with his left hand, he said to his servants, "Take her away. If not, I shall die. A gaudy smell issues from her." So the servants, in distress and astonishment, conducted her to the king and told him what had happened. Then the king sent for the specialist in women and said, "Brahman, she has anointed herself with sandal, camphor, and aloes, so that a delightful perfume pervades her neighborhood. How could this woman have a gaudy smell?" But in spite of this, the specialist in women would not yield. And when the king endeavored to learn the truth, he heard from her own lips that in her infancy she had been separated from her mother and had been brought up on goat's milk. Then the king was greatly astonished and loudly praised the critical judgment of the specialist in women. Quickly he had a couch prepared for the third brother, the specialist in cotton. So the critic of cotton went to sleep on a bed with 7 quilts over the frame and covered with a pure, soft coverlet. When only a half of the first watch of the night was gone, he suddenly started from the bed, shouting and writhing with pain, his hand pressed to his side. And the king's men, who were stationed there, saw the curly red outline of a hair deeply imprinted on his side. They went at once and informed the king, who said to them, "See whether there is anything under the quilts or not." So they went and searched under each quilt, and under the last they found one hair, which they immediately took and showed to the king. And the king summoned the specialist in cotton, and finding the mark exactly corresponding to the hair, was filled with extreme astonishment. And he spent that night wondering how the hair could sink into his body through 7 quilts. Now, when the king arose in the morning, he was delighted with their marvelous critical judgment and sensitiveness, so that he gave each of the 3 specialists 100,000 gold pieces. And they were contented and stayed there, forgetting all about the turtle, and thus incurring a crime through the failure of their father's sacrifice. When he had told this remarkable story, the goblin on the king's shoulder said, "O king, remember the curse I spoke of, and declare which of these 3 was the cleverest." When he heard this, the wise king answered the goblin, "Without doubt, I regard the specialist in cotton as the cleverest, on whose body the imprint of the hair was seen to appear visibly. The other 2 might possibly have found out beforehand." When the king had said this, the goblin slipped from his shoulder as before, and the king went back under the sisu tree again to fetch him. 9th Goblin. The 4 scientific suitors. To which should the girl be given? Then the king went back to the sisu tree, put the goblin on his shoulder, and started. And the goblin spoke to him again. "O king, why do you go to such pains in this cemetery at night? Do you not see the home of the ghosts, full of dreadful creatures, terrible in the night, wrapped in darkness as in smoke? Why do you work so hard and grow weary for the sake of that monk? Well, to amuse the journey, listen to a puzzle which I will tell you. In the Avanti country is a city built by the gods at the beginning of time, adorned with wonderful wealth and opportunities for enjoyment. In the earliest age it was called Lotus City, then Pleasure City, then Golden City, and now it is called Ujjain. There lived a king named Heroic, and his queen was named Lotus. One day the king went with her to the sacred Ganges river and prayed to Shiva that he might have children. And after long prayer, he heard a voice from heaven, for Shiva was at last pleased with his devotion. "O king, there shall be born to you a brave son to continue your dynasty, and a daughter more beautiful than the nymphs of heaven." When he heard the heavenly voice, the king was delighted at the fulfillment of his wishes and went back to his city with the queen. And first, Queen Lotus bore a son called Brave, and then a daughter named Grace, who put the god of love to shame. When the girl grew up, the king sought for a suitable husband for her and invited all the neighboring princes by letter, but not one of them seemed good enough for her. So the king tenderly said to his daughter, "My dear, I do not see a husband worthy of you, so I will summon all the kings hither, and you shall choose." But the princess said, "My dear father, such a choice would be very embarrassing. I would rather not. Just marry me to any good-looking young man who understands a single science from beginning to end. I wish nothing more nor less than that." Now, while the king was looking for such a husband, 4 brave, good-looking, scientific men from the south heard of the matter and came to him. And when they had been hospitably received, each explained his own science to the king. The first said, "I am a working man, and my name is Five Cloth. I make 5 splendid suits of clothes a day. 1 I give to some god, and 1 to a Brahman. One I wear myself, and one I shall give to my wife when I have one. The fifth I sell to buy food and things. This is my science. Pray give me grace." The second said, "I am a farmer, and my name is Linguist. I understand the cries of all beasts and birds. Pray give me the princess." The third said, "I am a strong-armed soldier, and my name is Swordsman. I have no rival on earth in the science of swordsmanship. O king, pray give me your daughter." The fourth said, "O king, I am a Brahmin, and my name is Life. I possess a wonderful science, for if dead creatures are brought to me, I can quickly restore them to life. Let your daughter find a husband in a man who has such heroic skill." When they had spoken, and the king had seen that they all had wonderful garments and personal beauty, he and his daughter swung in doubt. When the goblin had told this story, he said to the king, "Remember the girls I mentioned and tell me to which of them the girl should be given." And the king said to the goblin, "Sir, you are merely trying to gain time by making me break silence. There is no puzzle about that. How could a warrior's daughter be given to a working man or weaver? Or to a farmer either? And as to his knowledge of the speech of beasts and birds, of what practical use is it? And what good is a Brahmin who neglects his own affairs and turns magician, despising real courage? Of course he should be given to the warrior swordsman who had some manhood with his science." When the goblin heard this, he escaped by magic from the king's shoulder and disappeared. And the king followed him as before. Discouragement never enters the brave heart of a resolute man. 10th Goblin. The 3 delicate wives of King Virtue Banner. Which is the most delicate? Then the king went to the sisu tree, put the goblin on his shoulder once more, and started toward the monk. And as he walked along, the goblin on his shoulder said, "O king, I will tell you a strange story to relieve your weariness. Listen. There once was a king in Ujjain whose name was Virtue Banner. He had 3 princesses as wives and loved them dearly. One of them was named Crescent, the second Star, and the third Moon. While the king lived happily with his wives, he conquered all his enemies and was content. One day, at the time of the spring festival, the king went to the garden to play with his 3 wives. There he looked at the flower-laden vines with black rows of bees on them. They seemed like the bow of the god of love, all ready for service. He heard the songs of nightingales in the trees. They sounded like commands of love. And with his wives he drank wine which seemed like love's very lifeblood. Then the king playfully pulled the hair of Queen Crescent, and a lotus petal fell from her hair into her lap. And the queen was so delicate that it wounded her, and she screamed and fainted, and the king was distracted. But when servants sprinkled her with cool water and fanned her, she gradually recovered consciousness. And the king took her to the palace and waited upon his dear wife with 100 remedies which the physicians brought. And when the king saw that she was made comfortable for the night, he went to the palace balcony with his second wife, Star. Now while she slept on the king's breast, the moonbeams found their way through the window and fell upon her. And she awoke in a moment and started up, crying, "I am burned!" Then the king awoke and anxiously asked what the matter was, and he saw great blisters on her body. When he asked her about it, Queen Star said, "The moonbeams that fell on me did it." And the king was distracted when he saw how she wept and suffered. He called the servants, and they made a couch of moist lotus leaves and dressed her wounds with damp sandal paste. At that moment, the third queen, Moon, left her room to go to the king. And as she moved through the noiseless night, she clearly heard in a distant part of the palace the sound of pestles grinding grain. And she cried, "Oh, oh, it'll kill me!" She wrung her hands and sat down in agony in the hall. But her servants returned and led her to her room, where she took to her bed and wept. And when the servants asked what the matter was, she tearfully showed her hands with bruises on them, like two lilies with black bees clinging to them. So they went and told the king, and he came in great distress and asked his dear wife about it. She showed her hands and spoke, though she suffered. "My dear, when I heard the sound of the pestles, these bruises came." Then the king made them give her a cooling plaster of sandal paste and other things. And the king thought, "One of them was wounded by a falling lotus petal. The second was burned by the moonbeams. The third had her hands terribly bruised by the sound of pestles. I love them dearly, but alas, the very delicacy, which is so great a virtue, is positively inconvenient." And he wandered about in the palace, and it seemed as if the night had 300 hours. But in the morning, the king and his skillful physicians took such measures that before long his wives were well and he was happy. When he had told his story, the goblin said, "O king, which of them was the most delicate?" And the king said, "The one who was bruised by the mere sound of the pestles when nothing touched her. The other two who were wounded or blistered by actual contact with lotus petals or moonbeams are not equal to her." When the goblin heard this, he went back, and the king resolutely hastened to catch him again. So that's it for today's story reading of 22 Goblins. I hope you enjoyed hearing me read till the 10th Goblin chapter as much as I did reading it to you. We are moving right along through the book, and the next chapter is going to be even better. If you are enjoying this journey, please like this video to support the channel and subscribe so you don't miss the next chapters. Thanks for joining me in this magical world, and I'll see you in the next episode of 22 Goblins. Happy reading and happy listening. Till we meet again, take care and bye-bye.